Hello, this is Julie Fast for juliefast.com and bipolarhappens.com. It's quite sunny getting in my eyes today. I live with bipolar disorder. I've lived with bipolar disorder since I was around 16 years old, and I thought I would take you back to what it was like for me at the beginning. Like many people, I wasn't diagnosed until much later in life, but my symptoms actually started quite early. My first symptoms, from what I can remember, because I didn't know what I was looking for back then, my first symptoms were actually symptoms of psychosis. I remember being in bookstores. I loved bookstores, so this is the early 80s. And I would sit in a bookstore and I'd be excited. And I mean, we had Walden Books and Honolulu Bookstore. I lived in Hawaii at the time. And I would sit down, get all my books out, and I'd sit. Now, this was in a mall, and this is important. And often, I would hear a voice that would say, "You need to get out of this store now." And I'd look around, and I'd look behind me, and I'd look, and I'd think, is someone here telling me to get out of this store? I didn't know what it was. This happened for years. "You need to leave now. You shouldn't be here." And the voice was booming like that. It wasn't necessarily a male or a female voice, though I would say it was a pretty intense voice. So it wasn't soft or anything, and it was very command. Of course, I now know that these are command voices. These are psychotic command voices. Eventually, I learned, now that I'm in my 50s, I learned that I get stress psychosis. And so that means if I'm in a very busy place, even if I'm happy to be there, I can become psychotic simply from the stress of all the clamor and the noise around me. So malls, for many, many years, were sources of psychosis for me. And I could never understand why, if I tried to shop for clothing or if I would go to a bookstore, I would hear a voice that said I had to leave. I do apologize for the sun. I can see that it's lighting my face a little differently today. As I got older, I then at age 17, 18, had my first hypomanic episode. I guess I was 17. It happened in Europe, so no one really saw it. It was a euphoric hypomanic episode. I was in Hawaii, went to Europe with a group of students. In fact, some of them are probably watching this now. And then I went back to school. I was a junior in high school, and I thought, who was that person? She was so happy and excited and not worried about her body and wasn't weirded out about guys or whatever. And she drank some and she was so much fun. That was hypomanic, Julie. I didn't know that. Went back to being pretty stable. So my bipolar disorder started with psychosis and mild euphoric, well, it wasn't mild, pretty strong euphoric hypomania. Then at age 18, I simply left school, didn't say goodbye to anybody, and went to college. And I had my next euphoric hypomanic episode. Oh my goodness, what hypomania does, what euphoric mania does. I went to Auburn University, did really well, sort of fell for a football player, and one day woke up and decided literally that school was not for me, and it would be smarter for me to move to a school where there was a professional hockey team close by so that I could watch Wayne Gretzky play hockey. That's what I did. I left an amazing university and went up way north in Washington where my parents were living and went to a university because it was close to Vancouver, to the Vancouver Canucks. Now, one thing I will say, I watched a lot of hockey, but can you imagine making a decision of your whole future based off going to see a hockey team? That's what mania does. And of course, my family had no idea what was going on. They're like, Julie's weird, what's happening? But they let me do it and I went up there. Then I started having what I now see were my first dysphoric manic and depressive suicidal episodes. I started to drink very, very heavily every night. Started to have relationship problems, which I'd never had that I recalled. I would wake up and feel one way and then wake up and feel another way. So I was massively rapid cycling by the time I was 18. I stopped going to school completely. And I would sit in what we called the quad, which was where the bricks were, and I would simply watch people go to class. I became obsessed with men, which became a really big problem in my life, and eventually just left school and would go up to Vancouver to party, and that's when I met my first boyfriend, Brad. He really was quite amazing, and I moved in with him. At age 19, I left school in a manic episode and overnight moved in with a guy. He actually was a wonderful man, so I was very lucky in that. We didn't last very long, of course, because I was 19 and started to go down from my hypomania. And that's when I went into my first extreme suicidal depression at age 19, was after Brad broke up with me. And my first thought of this suicidal depression, I can remember it. I was riding my bike and I was near a bus, and I remember thinking, just move that bike in front of that bus and everything will be better. And once again, I would go, first of all, where did that voice come from? What kind of thought is that? And secondly, oh my God, what does that mean? I had no idea what I was going through. Went through that severe suicidal depression for a couple months. And then suddenly I was better, and I took off and I went to work at Glacier National Park in Montana and had one of the greatest summers of my life because I was hypomanic. And that was the start of my bipolar disorder. Would you believe that I lived that way from age 16 to 31? 15 solid years of intense, constant, rapid cycling. Many of us who are diagnosed with bipolar 2 have this kind of history of years and years and years of trying to get help for depression, not knowing what anxiety is, and certainly not understanding mania. So maybe you're like me. Maybe it took a long time for you to get your diagnosis. Or maybe you're like my former partner, Ivan. I wrote the book Loving Someone with Bipolar Disorder about my long-term relationship with Ivan. Maybe you're like him and you just got really, really sick when you were really young and it put you in the hospital. There's all different ways that our bipolar starts. But for most of us, there's signs of it when we're quite young. Average onset is early teens. It's different, by the way. That's adult onset bipolar. Childhood onset bipolar is really quite different and has a lot of different symptoms. Whereas those of us, I'm in my 50s, you talk to someone who's in their 50s with bipolar, we probably had signs of it in our teens or late teens. So that's the history of how my bipolar disorder started. Feel free to share your history below. You can read more about my work at bipolarhappens.com and juliefast.com. My blog is there as well. And also, please visit bphope.com. That's BP Magazine for bipolar disorder. And there is some wonderful information on that site. You'll find all my blogs, plus the blogs of a lot of people I really respect. Have a great day.